7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
I'm here with Matthias J. Barker, right?
Yeah, Matthias J. Barker. That's right.
Okay, and I'm meeting him at the same time as you are meeting him. So, Matthias, thank you for being here with us.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me.
And getting into the interesting conversation, because you told me that you have like TikTok and Instagram
Yeah.
account, and you do a lot around mental health, and you started that a few years ago. So
yeah,
can you tell us the story, your story?
Yeah, right around
who you are and what you ended up doing, and what
Mhm.
you're doing today, and why it's so important for
It's great.
us.
So right around the pandemic for COVID-19, I had just graduated with my master's degree, to get licensed in the States. And it
In
was just
psychology, right?
in psychology. That's right. Yeah, in psychology, to be a counselor, and I had clients, and I was working for about a year, before all the COVID stuff, all the lockdowns and everything was shut down. And I remember at that time, this was before we really knew what COVID was going to do. We didn't know if it was going to be 1,000 people that were going to die, 10,000, a million, 10 million. Like, we didn't know the severity, and everyone was very anxious and everyone was very scared. And so it was right when everyone was kind of locking down, not, visiting their neighbors. Maybe we had a little bit of a walk outside, something like that. But everyone was isolated and everyone was terrified. And the election in the United States was happening right around November of that year, I think 2020. Or 2019, 2020, somewhere in there.
Yeah, and
That's
the lockdown arrived in March
Mhm.
20. I remember because we did anxiety and fear online summit.
Yes.
And because we said that we had this pandemic coming and this lockdown, and saying we have to do something for people.
Yeah.
And that's how we put out together our first online summit.
Yeah.
And you did something else.
Well, I think so many people like yourself jumped online, and we downloaded Zoom for the first time. And we all were trying to find ways to get that mental health information to people, because a lot of therapists, I was included, but lots of other friends, their wait lists became full immediately. And we were trying to figure out how to do therapy, but over video calls. That was kind of the first time that a lot of my colleagues were doing that. And so in addition to all that, there's this app called TikTok that was like getting, I don't know, like known for like the Gen Z kind of young kids. And it wasn't obvious that I was like allowed on that app back then. That was just like teenage girls dancing. And so I'm like, I don't know if I'm allowed to like make mental health videos and put them on there as a millennial, but whatever. And so just as kind of something to do for fun, I made these little 1 minute, back then actually it was 15 seconds that they had limits on how much you could put on the app, but it was a 15-second video talking about anxiety, or talking about fear, or talking about breathing through, really painful emotions. And I didn't think much of it. I just kind of threw it up there. And then I don't think I logged back into the app for a few weeks. When I did log back in, I saw that one of them went to 100,000 views. And that was really exciting. I've never experienced that before. And so I made a couple more, and then one went to 300,000, and then 500,000, and then 3 million, and then kind of just kept making them. And I got 1 million followers on TikTok in 1 month.
Wow.
And a lot of people kind of like me around that time had a similar experience. And so folks like Julie Smith or Nicole LaPera, or the millennial therapist, like there was a lot of different just therapists and psychologists that were trying to create mental health content for people who were really going through a lot of fear and were isolated. And the general public was really ready for it. So they just scooped it up. And then there was these voices that just kind of launched into the public conversation, at least in the United States, that started to shape the conversation around mental health. And a lot of the voices that came up were talking about trauma, and talking about relationships and conflict, and how to navigate conflict in those deep relationships, how to set boundaries, how to work through some of the wounding you've had in your relationships in the past and bring that back up in a healthy way. And so I was among those voices, and wasn't the only one, for sure. And then it kind of continued to grow and grow. So I think between everything, all the different accounts, it's something like 3.5 million, something in there. And I've just, without really meaning to, I guess. I mean, I posted the videos obviously, but it wasn't like my strategic thing, but it was just something that happened where I'm like, okay, this is part of the conversation that I'm going to be a part of, and trying to do the best I can with that. And so some folks might know Frank Anderson. He's an IFS trainer, lead trainer. And I reached out to him pretty quickly after everything happened and was looking for that training, looking for just some mentorship. And he's incredible. He's an incredible,
He is.
insightful expert in the field. And he was really gracious and took me on as a protege for those years. And so it was like 2 or 3 years of him looking at my client sessions every week, and with my client's consent, of course, and then just watching is like, okay, you could be doing this differently. Why'd you say this? Like, did you notice they took a breath there? You could have said this. And it was great because I was so new when everything happened. And I kind of only half knew what I was talking about. Like I was doing my homework, but again, I was just green. And then with that mentorship and with that expertise to kind of come and just, I felt like I could come into my own, and I really kind of got grounded within this field of mental health and helping people heal from trauma, heal their relationships. So then what that looks like today is Frank and I started a trauma institute. And I think combining some of just the resources I have through social media and in the public eye, but then his expertise, bringing those things together, creating trauma awareness around how to heal from trauma, how to heal relationships, introducing people to different methods of how to heal from trauma, like IFS or EMDR or different things like that. And then there's also a therapy training component to that. So I'm having a ball. I think it's just, it's a really wild roller coaster.
So you started this institute, this Trauma Institute with
Yeah.
Frank.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I'm the CEO. I'm helping everything. He kind of casts the vision, has the ideas, I make it happen, and film all the videos and everything. And I'm just thrilled to be a part of it. Yeah.
That's great. And what are, so now you're still doing videos on social media. What are the things that people are waiting for or that are craving for that you realize through your social media?
I think there's lots. I mean, there's romantic relationships, there's healing from trauma. I think one topic that stood out to me in the past year that I've seen really grow is the occurrence of being estranged from a parent or a family member. There was a study that came out just recently, 2023. I forget the author off the top of my head, but it was a large, wide study that showed that 1 in 4 people are estranged from someone in a nuclear family. And in the U.S., so 25% of people are estranged from a family member, and it's because
what do you mean by our estranged?
So estranged meaning they're no longer in contact with each other. They're not talking. They said, I'm putting a boundary up. I no longer want to have a relationship with you. Often from the kid to the parent. So for the adult child, 20, 30 years old, is saying, I don't want a relationship with my parent anymore because of relational trauma that happened in the relationship as children. And so I have lots of people in my following, that both kids and parents, that are talking about this relational trauma, and they're asking questions like, how do I set a boundary, or how do I communicate the areas when I grew up that I feel was painful for me, without them getting defensive, without them getting angry, or feeling like I'm saying that they're a bad parent, or feeling like I'm saying that I don't love them. Like, how do I have that nuanced conversation? And this all kind of came together for me because I've been also, alongside training with Frank, I've been training with a man named David Kessler. And David Kessler wrote, you know, those stages of grief, like bargaining, acceptance. Like, so he co-wrote that book with someone named Kubler-Ross. And so David is known worldwide as a grief expert, and he does these groups where he meets with people and helps them walk through their grief. And as part of a kind of a trade that he would train me in exchange for me helping him with the Zoom calls, I would come in and help him facilitate these meetings where he'd bring on maybe like 6 people and then just work with them for maybe 10 or 15 minutes on their grief. And then he trained me to do the same. So I would do in these groups and kind of be working with people in these very fast, very rapid sessions for maybe 10 to 15 minutes, helping them through the stuck points that they experience in their grief. And then I had an aha moment. I'm like, oh, I think loss and grief and estrangement, being cut off from a relationship, that relational divide, are very similar. Both are loss, and I mean, both are grief. But one, the other person's still alive, and the other one is passed away. And so I started to experiment, kind of like pulling the information, everything I was learning from David, everything I'm learning from Frank, trying to bring that into this conversation around relational trauma. When we get into an argument and we just stop talking to each other, and maybe it's often the kid cutting off contact and the parent being very grieved. The parent being like, I miss my grandchildren. I miss being able to see you. I'm in old age. I'm becoming vulnerable. I spent my whole life raising you. How could you abandon me right now? And it felt very important to me to kind of contribute to that conversation. So a lot of my public channels started to talk about that estrangement process and how to bring families back together, even if there's been trauma and abuse and hardship. And then I started to do some public events around that and some course offerings and workshops. And it's been the most signed up for courses and events I've ever done. Probably 30% more people showing up to that than anything I'd ever experienced. And so I think there is a cultural moment around that topic, at least for the part of the internet I'm interacting with, that seems really important. So
Well, all
that
that
has my interest.
in 4 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
It has my interest. So I don't know what's happening in the world, but my version, it seems like that's a really big deal.
And so you do you still see clients individually?
I do. Yeah.
Okay, so you manage to have both.
Yeah.
And what is the ratio between your private practice and your public public practice?
Yeah,
if I can
so
say it like that.
it's changed for the past 4 years. It's been 2 days a week that I've seen clients, and then it just recently went down to 1 day a week because I'm going to bring on some of these groups where we do parental estrangement. And so I think that it's going to be multiple families kind of all together on a Zoom call, and we're going to be both, kids and parents, not from the same families, but people who are struggling with those relationships together and having those conversations around how to heal that relational trauma and bring families together. That's something I'm focusing on this year, about how to make that happen. So I'm opening up a day to kind of focus on those groups exclusively. So that's probably happening this summer for me. I'm thinking about it.
We could talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Thanks. Yeah. I'm super fascinated. Yeah, I'm open.
Yeah. Okay. And around the social media, it's sometimes a little like, I've seen many people struggle with social media because it takes a lot of time. How do you manage that?
Yeah. Well, I think that it was, it's a creative process. It's like any art form. And that was how I approached it. Because it's like, you think of a 1-minute video, what can you really say in 1 minute? It doesn't seem like very much, probably. But a poem, you can say a lot in a poem. You can say in a very small piece of literature, you can have a lot of meaning in one piece of an idea. And so I started to approach these little videos that seem kind of lighthearted, but with the perspective of, okay, someone might be reading this and they're genuinely open to, let's say, a broken relationship with their son. And what does somebody who has not spoken to their son in a year and misses them terribly need to hear? And then I write that out and I sit on that for a day, and then the next day I'll come back and be like, I could say this a little bit different, or I might change the word, or maybe I'll change the introductory sentence. We call that the hook. Like maybe there's a more gripping way to open the conversation, or this and that. So I don't really think about it like, oh, I got to get this done as fast as possible. I kind of take a lot of pride in being able to say like, oh, there's something really meaningful. It's a personal expression. It's an art form, and it's like saying a painting takes a long time, but yeah, sure. But I love it. So
you're a screenwriter.
Kinda. It feels that way. It feels it's its own thing. But I take a lot of intention with it.
Okay. Well, where can people find you?
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah. Matthias J. Barker. So that's my username on TikTok or on Instagram. That's where I'm most active, on Instagram, TikTok. Matthias J. Barker.
Only English.
Yeah, it's in English. Yeah. Maybe one day I'll have French channel. Yep. As my team expands, that's in the cards. Thank you.
If we can help in any way.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for having me on. This is great.
I have a last question. What kind of responsibility is it to have 3.5 or more followers?
Yeah.
Many people rely on you or follow you.
Yeah.
So how do you manage that?
It is a big responsibility.
It is.
I think when all that started happening at the beginning, the first thing I did was reach out for that mentorship. I didn't want to make just decisions by myself. I think that was the biggest thing. I wanted to see my own humanity and my own flaws, and then I'm trying my best, but that means I'm going to say things wrong. And so then having people like Frank Anderson or David Kessler in my head and watching my videos, and there's been times Frank has commented on a video of mine. He'd be like, hey, I saw you said that, but I wasn't quite right here. And maybe you could, there's a little bit more nuance there, or you kind of missed the mark here. And then I take it down, I rewrite it, I try again. There's this collaboration, this, this partnership that I have with some of these mentors that I've been so fortunate to surround myself with, that makes it feel like it's not just on my shoulders. It kind of feels more like a group effort.
You're not alone.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. They'll tell you in the comments too. If you get it wrong, people will let you know. So I've had that before, where I've made a post and people are like, hey, no, you missed something. And I learn. I try not to be defensive and be like, no, I'm right. But to try to be open-minded to people.
And would you take off the video when it's happening, or do you just do another one? How do you manage that?
Sometimes I'll take it down, I'll rewrite it, and then I'll repost when I want to try a second approach at something. Sometimes it's a mistake that deserves to be out there in public conversation, like, because people are discussing it. It kind of brings, something together. Like, for example, I made a post that I used the word normal, and I said something like, oh, well, if you're not acting normal, da 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 da. And in American culture, that was translated kind of offensively. They're like, what do you mean normal? Like, there's it almost had an ableist kind of tension in the conversation. And so in that way, I didn't want to just guard my own reputation and just not come off like I'm being offensive. Like, I wrote in the comments, like, here's what I meant by what I was saying. Here's what I've read in the comments that really informed how have taken that. And I'm going to let that be there, because it seems like in the comments, people were really discussing that topic, and it seemed like everyone was enriched by it. So there's moments when I take it down, moments when I take it on the chin, because I think it is better for the public conversation. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Is there anything you want to say about mental health and about bringing mental health? Because that's what you do.
Yeah,
it's bringing mental health at the front, which is interesting, because people usually don't want to talk about it. So is there anything you want to say here about that, maybe? Why it's so important to talk about mental health, and maybe to bring that out of any secret space or taboo or...
Yeah. I think that so much of the things that we're struggling with get worse when we feel like we're alone, and we feel like no one understands what we're feeling, and I don't have any choices. And then what's beautiful about something, even just like a 1-minute video, as silly as they are, I don't put too much stock that the world can change from a 1-minute video or something. But if there's just even a moment when it's like, oh, that feels like me, and maybe I was going to make an impulsive decision, but this made me step back and reevaluate, or just kind of look inside. And I'm like, oh, cool. That seems like it makes a small, but maybe significant difference. And it's the truth. When you say something that's true, it has a transformative effect on the world. And you can say something true in a short amount of time. And so I just think that whether it's mental health information, or whether it's talking about depression or anxiety or trauma or whatever, there's these small ways that you can try to share what's true in the world. And if it lands in people's hearts, it makes something really beautiful happen. So that's what I believe. That's why I do it.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me in this conversation. It's wonderful.
Hope to see you soon.
Yes, wonderful. Thanks.